Hell yeah. I appreciate that. Okay, so um, let's see if Jeremy can put the slide up in the corner. We were working on this earlier. Um, yeah, this is an exciting new thing here. There we go. Leaning into imperfection is our theme for this week, and it's a good one. So let's jump in. I wish I could be there with everybody. I wish I could see your faces. I miss that right now. But this is what it is, and so we're gonna lean into it. So this first thing that I thought I would do, if we look at this first slide, I thought I would bring up examples of where nature shows up in perfection. So my first slide here is a picture of what my spouse and I, we call our the love cactus. So this cactus here has been with us for 22 years. It was the first birthday present I bought for my spouse when we first started dating. And this love cactus has been through a lot. It's been through, I believe now, 7 moves. At one point, it was down to the size of like my fingernail, my pinky fingernail. It was just a tiny little nubbin. But in this last few years, it's just all of a sudden, like we thought it was done. We thought it had a limited lifespan, and out of nowhere, it just started thriving again. So if we go to that next slide, a couple of weeks ago, I was, thinking about the upcoming month on leaning into imperfection, and so I started noticing things around me. And so I noticed on that, I'll call it a petal. I don't know what else you would call that on a cactus, how the rows and like how perfect those little patterns of the needles are. And so if we'll go to the next slide, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like there's these diagonal rows and columns that it's just amazing how perfect it is, how perfect Mother Nature is. And then I started looking a little more closely. So if we go to that next slide, like, oh, Mother Nature, we were so close. I was with you. I was bragging you up about how perfect you are. And now I looked a little more closely and look what happened. I found where the rows weren't in straight lines anymore. There was a little more space between. And I think you get my point. If we scrutinize anything enough, we'll always be able to find flaws. There's always something there. But that's actually what makes the things absolutely perfect how they are. So I do have just a couple other images I thought I would share because I love seeing how nature shows up in its amazing ways. And so these couple images here on the right, it's Romanesco or Roman broccoli or cauliflower, and it's just amazing. But if you look really close, you can find things that you could say aren't perfect. And then we'll go ahead and scroll on to the next ones. There's a bottom of a lily pad is amazing. And then this really beautiful yellow and orange flower. But if you look down, like in the bottom right corner, you'll see how one of those petals is kind of misshapen. And so, again, like my point is that nothing is absolutely perfect. If we scrutinize anything long enough, you will be able to point out flaws. And it's actually those things that make us just see that makes things absolutely perfect how they are. This is where we get our individuality, our uniqueness. It's in those things. And so you've probably heard me say before that, and it's one of my principles, my personal principles that mean so much to me, is that nothing is absolutely perfect, which then in turn means that everything is absolutely perfect. It's the perfect system for our experience in life. And now I'm wondering, like I found a quote, and maybe this is where I picked up that idea from like 20 years ago when I read this book. But Alice Walker, we'll go ahead and show the next clip, the next slide. It says, in nature, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. Trees can be contorted, bent in weird ways, and they're still beautiful. That quote comes from Alice Walker, the author of The Color Purple. So maybe that's why it's been floating around in my head for so long, but it's just absolutely perfect when we lean into the imperfections that make things so rich and vibrant and diverse and exhilarating is a word I like to use. So I have just a couple more pictures since Alice Walker mentioned trees. I'll share a couple of other images. So the next image is this wonderful tree shape. And if you look, you can see it's not perfectly symmetrical. There are places where it doesn't form a perfect circle around the top of that tree. And that's actually what makes it more unique. And then the next slide is just amazing trees that just doing their own Mother Nature thing in just a wonderful way that it does. And then the last one is just a picture perfect image of fall where most of the leaves have fallen, but there's still some colorful on there on a perfectly still water lake with the reflection. Just an image that for me, it just inspires of achieving or striving to be the most beautiful that I can be, the most representative of what we come from, which is that infinite, which is spirit. Like we come from an amazing thing. All right, so that's just to give you some ideas of how nothing would be considered absolutely perfect under deep scrutiny, which is what makes it really perfect. So now I want to give a little bit of a trigger warning. If you identify as a perfectionist, if you've ever used that term like, well, I'm a perfectionist, I just can't quite do that, I can't, whatever it is. If you identify as a perfectionist, trigger warning and a disclaimer, this may or may not apply to you. The definitions I'm going to use or the excuses of being a perfectionist, they apply to me. And I know that my story is not the same as every story. So don't take this personal or take it, with a grain of salt if that's you. And at that same time, if you do identify as a perfectionist and you've never thought about it in this ways, I invite you to just be open-minded and maybe aware and see where maybe that label isn't a great thing for you. So when I was around, I want to say it was about 11 years old, I had an older sister who had glasses, and I started thinking maybe I needed glasses. And so I got my mom to take me to the eye doctor. We went through the whole thing where he's saying, can you see better with number 1 or number 2? Number 1 or number 2? We went through that whole thing, that whole process, and at the end, he kind of just shakes his head, and he's like, you're very close to perfect vision. You're not quite there. He's like, so I think maybe you're just a perfectionist. Well, in my mind, I heard perfection in there and a perfectionist. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm a perfectionist. That's what I am. I like that. And so I thought, that's the label I was going to hold. And as time went on, especially once I started on this spiritual exploration and personal growth path, I realized where I had actually sabotaged myself over life by using that excuse of, being a perfectionist. And so there's ways that this shows up. So a lot of times, being a perfectionist can be a form of procrastination. It can be a form of insecurity, or it could be, an internalized safety mechanism, a way to protect our ego and protect ourselves. So lots of these things. And so there are ways around it. So as it comes to like procrastination, with the idea of perfection, we wait until all the circumstances are just perfect, until I have the perfect equipment, until I have the perfect people ready to do it, until my idea is perfectly hashed out. And what ends up happening is this, that we never start. We just procrastinate. So the antidote to that is to just recognize that taking any action is better than no action. And then when it comes to insecurity, a lot of times, we say we're perfectionists, and so because of that, I'm not going to put out what it is that I want to share with the world. And I say, it's because I'm a perfectionist, I'm waiting until it's perfect. And so not recognizing that actually it was that I was insecure. I was worried about what other people were going to think, what they were going to say about me or say about what it is that I'm doing. And so I just got to wait until it's absolutely perfect. So I give them no opportunities whatsoever to talk bad about what it is I'm doing. And so the antidote to that one, to insecurity, is just saying, who cares if it's embarrassing? Who cares what they say? Because typically the ones that are going to speak up in unsupportive ways are the ones that I really don't care what their opinion is anyway, for the most part. The people that are loving and supporting, they're going to support you even more when they see you putting yourself out there. And then one other form of perfectionism is, I see it as a safety mechanism. It's to protect me. It's like a wall around me that my ego won't be able to handle any negative criticism. And so people will judge me, people will think less of me. And so that perfectionism is like a safety blanket wrapped around me to protect from anything happening, from any of my feelings getting hurt, not recognizing that safety is kind of an illusion. All of those things are going to happen anyway. So I might as well let them happen by while I'm taking risks and being vulnerable and putting myself out there. There's a saying that you've maybe heard before, and originally apparently it comes from Voltaire, but he said, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Let that sit in just again. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We are all different. We are all unique. And it's the little, foibles and idiosyncrasies, the things that make us distinct from one another. And that's amazing, because in that same idea that there's no two snowflakes, there's no two human beings that are exactly the same either. And so we all have our own things that we would like to put out there, and they would be pretty good if we can express from our core of what inspires us, of what comes from the one infinite mind at which we are, but by requiring things in our mind to be perfect to the standard, I've got to strive to be the absolute best that it can be, we never get to experience that good, because we're always just waiting. It's just always on the other side. So with that, I want to point out that the people in life who have done things that large groups of other people say that was absolutely perfect, it's a law of averages. People have put out so much out there that it's inevitable. If you create so much stuff, that's where the great comes from, is because just by the law of averages, once you have enough of one thing, sooner or later, odds are that you're going to hit that home run. So just thinking of, people, I reference Michael Jordan quite often, because he really seemed to get this. He talked about the reason why he was able to hit so many buzzer-beating, game-winning shots is because he missed way more than he ever made. He's constantly putting himself out there. And we have this idea sometimes, you'll see a new musician, a pop musician or pop star, seemingly like, they were an overnight success. They just broke, we get this idea that it was their first attempt that just skyrocketed them into overnight success. They were an instant success. But when you talk to them, you realize it was far from instant. It was a process of all their life of attempting, growing, trying new things, and putting them out there, and really being willing to stink at some things for a long time, for however long it took to build up into this process. So just getting rid of that idea that, like, when we want to put ourselves out there, like, we're going to create something that's so perfect that when we do, it's going to go viral. It's going to be, instant New York Times bestseller, or whatever it is that we have in our mind, that we have to make it all absolutely perfect. The fact of the matter is that it's the build up to it that starts to get, recognition. If somebody came out and just wrote the instant bestseller book, there's a good chance that it won't even get attention from any publishers, just because there's not a basis to look from. It's very rare that anybody would actually become that overnight success. So how then do we encourage ourselves to start creating, to start putting ourselves out there? How do we find the time to do it? And not becoming overwhelmed with this idea that there is something perfect that we have to get to. So I'm going to share a concept that I learned a few years ago, and it really resonated with me, and it has freed up some time in my life. It's still a work in progress that I need to, figure out where and when to apply this. But the concept, it comes from a book called The 4-Hour Work Week by the author is Tim Ferriss, and he called it the 80-20 concept. And there's different versions of the 80-20 concept, but the one that Tim Ferriss introduced to me is the one that I'm going to talk about today. And the idea is that 80% of the results in any project comes from 20% of the effort. So I'm going to let that set in for just a second. But 20% of the effort for any project gets you like 80% of the way. And so if you think about it, 80%, if we were in college, 80% is a low B, but it's still a B. Maybe you've heard the saying, C's get degrees. It's true. So that, 80% can get done with only 20% of the effort. And then if you're a perfectionist, you have this idea like, I got to get the A. I got to get, I'm looking for 100% here. Well, in order to get to that 100% from that 80% mark, it's going to take a lot more effort. The fine tuning, the going back and reassessing and then tweaking and then doing that again and again. And you might be able to get it to that 100% place, but was it worth it for that particular thing? Because I know for myself, once I heard this concept, I started, looking at the way that I would do different things. And I think, I have one example that my wife has this down really well when it comes to our house. Sometimes when the house is crazy, as it is, I have 2 children, we have lots of pets, and sometimes, the house falls apart a little bit while my spouse is working, while I'm working, while we're getting the kids to their activities, all of this. And then say we have somebody that's going to come over and visit, and we want that make the house look nice. My wife is a master of going through a house in a short amount of time and making it look pretty good. Right? That idea that, it's good enough. Whereas my hang up in the past has been I start trying to speed clean, and then I notice like maybe a little detail that, some piece of food that got neglected in the kitchen, and I'm going to start cleaning that. Next thing I know, I'm cleaning the entire backsplash. And then I've got, like a toothbrush out and I'm cleaning that little piece of the silicone caulking around the edge. And, at some point while I'm doing this and my spouse comes into the room when we're in a hurry to make the house, more inviting for our guests, she would look at me like, what are you doing? Why are you focusing on that little thing there? Like, I'm going for that 100% perfection. And in some moments, like, I don't have time for it. So the reason I bring this 80-20 concept in is what projects in your life, what things are taking you way more time than they need to? Like, what's really important? So when we learn to prioritize our tasks, the things that we need to do, a lot of them, we can let go of so much extra effort by just leaning into this. That 20% is going to get it to be good enough. And so when we do that, it opens this up to, where is another project that has a higher priority for me? It frees up time and space for the things that are really important to us by recognizing like not everything has to be absolutely perfect. So for this week, I want to encourage us, and it's a reminder to myself that if this resonates with you, I want to encourage you as well. Like, what tasks can you simplify? Can you make into I'm just going to do that 20% and I'm going to be okay with that. Trying to kind of prioritize those. And then if there is some other thing that's speaking to you that you want to bring into the world, if there's a bigger project or a thing of expression, I want you to turn it into a game. Because sometimes like those big ideas of, like maybe writing a book or maybe writing a new song, or, maybe it's even just cleaning the house. You're going to do a deep clean for the summer, whatever it is. Instead of letting that be an overwhelming thing, make it a game. What can I get done in just 5 minutes? I can give my 5 minutes time here and just do my best to hit a 20% effort to see what 80% results I can get. And a 5 minute here, a 5 minute there. What is the task? What's the things that you want to get out there? Open up and just recognize like everything is going to have its inherent little flaws, but it's that gives it life and gives us experience of knowing how to tweak it, how to make it into our other things. Like that masterpiece that's within every individual, it's not going to come out unless we spend lots of time getting the steps into it. If we wait for all the things to be perfect before we actually work on that masterpiece, or before we're willing to put the masterpiece forward, we end up stuck and never doing anything. That's when perfect becomes the enemy of the good. So with that being said, let's go on to the next slide. This is our spiritual principle for the week. And it is, we believe the ultimate goal of life to be a complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. So this principle comes from the paper that was written by Ernest Holmes, the founder. Originally it was I Believe, but we have changed it for our organization into We Believe. But if you look at that, the ultimate goal of life to be a complete freedom from all discord of every nature. Well, perfectionism and having a need for everything to be just perfect is a form of discord. So as we lean into it, this is one more place where we achieve freedom from this one discord. And that's really what spiritual practice is. Yes, we believe that we will be free of all discord of every nature, but it's not, more than likely, not going to happen all at once. So this is how we do it with this one particular discord. So we'll go on to the next slide, which is our spiritual practice for the week, which I'm calling reckless abandonment. What do you want to do? Let it all go. Letting go of the procrastination by just taking action. Any action is better than no action. Letting go of that insecurity. Who cares what they are going to say? Who cares how I'm going to be judged? I'd rather be judged for trying, and learning to not take things personal when the naysayers show up, because typically the naysayers are the ones that want to do something themselves, but they're not either. And so it's easier to scrutinize and nitpick other people. So letting that go. Reckless abandonment. What is it that you want to put out there into the world? And then we'll finish with our affirmation, which for this week is, I embrace imperfections and discover profound possibilities. So that if we can, let's have everybody say it along with me and say it with feeling and emotion. I embrace imperfections and discover profound possibilities. And we own that. I am going to work on that myself. And like I say, when I first heard about this 80-20 concept, I started applying it, and I know that there's other places where I can, and I know that I also still hold on to that idea of perfectionism, and it's a constant work in progress that I am leaning into more and more every day. And if you're like me, it won't come overnight, because it's ingrained. For the longest time, that was, like I said, since I was like 11 years old, I felt like that was my identity, not realizing that it was actually keeping me smaller. So then just to recap, nothing in nature could be considered by my scrutinizing mind to be absolutely perfect. And in turn, since nothing is perfect, that just makes the whole system absolutely perfect. And with that, then, how do I let go of perfectionism to, let go of the procrastination, that I will start what it is that I'm doing, because I know what's within me, what is inspired from the one infinite mind, is too important to not share out in the world. And so that most of those things are good enough at 80%. Just keep putting those things out there until you discover your masterpiece. So with that being said, I would like to take this within inner contemplation, if you'll join me, however you feel most comfortable. Just recognizing there's one infinite mind, one consciousness where all consciousness stems from, all thought is all shared from that same place, but we each individually express and experience the thought of the one mind in our own unique ways. And that is how we get to experience infinite nature. So I affirm and avow right here and right now that everyone hearing these words is an expression of the divine, of the one infinite mind, and that just by being born, you are inherently perfect in all ways. Everything we've done in our life is exactly what was meant to have happened, and we know that because it is what has happened. And moving forward, when we lean into our need for expression, we let go of the false idea of perfection and embrace the good enough, that what we do just by being, we are good enough, and that we strive to be our best, to grow and learn. And as we do it, we also are aware and anticipate knowing that there's always going to be little flaws, little things we wish we would have done differently, little things that we wish maybe we were better at. But the only way to do that is by embracing the imperfections. So I affirm and avow that each and every one of us is a unique expression of the divine, that we are all led and guided by that one infinite mind. And as we show up, we embrace where we have maybe a flaw or a foible. We embrace that, knowing that it's inherent in everything, and that is the unique characteristics that can only come through us. And so we celebrate every minor setback, or celebrate every imperfection that we see, knowing that as we see those, it means that we are growing, that we are putting ourselves out there, that we are expressing the infinite ways that we are that divine infinite nature, divine infinite mind. And without us and our inherent things that make us unique, we lose the sense of infinite nature, and that would be a shame. So in gratitude for the law, in gratitude for the one infinite mind that makes us who and what we are, I say thank you for it all. I embrace the ways that I show up that don't look ideal, knowing that that is actually 100% perfectly ideal, just how it is. I love life, I love the variations, and I embrace it all, and I invite each and every one of us to do the same. May this week bring boundless examples of putting ourselves out there, of experiencing more by saying yes, making it a game. So I release these words knowing that Spirit carries us, Spirit inspires us, and Spirit is always there with us. And that is the gift of life. And I affirm that this is so, and you can join me by saying, and so it is. So it is.